Hi, welcome to You with Intention. This is the show where we help you consciously create your life. I'm your host and spiritual mentor, Cassandra, and today is the first part of potentially a two-part series called Sacred Structure. And we're going to really dive in today about how we can use our astrology and our human design to create a daily and weekly schedule that has us thriving and moving from feeling chaotic and out of control and just at the whim of our schedule and time depleted to feeling really like grounded and like we're making positive progress, like we're being held by our schedule, like we are in alignment with what is on the calendar. And I'm breaking this into, I'm thinking two parts, could be more depending on how long each one takes, because there's so much I can go into on this. And this is something that I have been really present with recently as a new mom, postpartum, getting my groove back on, having many passions, having many obligations in this season, and really trying to find a rhythm that works for me, both, on a soul level and with, the way I want my life to feel and be and look. And I know that I'm not alone in this. I feel like this is something that any multi passionate woman struggles with. So many of us are juggling so many things right now. And whether it's being a mom and working career and doing a passion project, or maybe it's you're moving while you're starting a new career or wanting a new career. Maybe you've got an ailing family member that you're taking care of while you're working a couple of jobs and taking care of your family. We are all stretched so thin and we have so much going on in our day. And I know if you're listening to this, you've also got big dreams and desires. You have juicy creative things that you want to sink your teeth into. You want to connect with yourself spiritually and your intuition, right? You've got so much going on. And I just have to tell you that at every juncture of my life, and this might come as a surprise because I am a little like, eccentric artist, like Pisces, the whimsical being type. But I think you guys probably know from seeing, having written, 4 books at this point, having created a thriving business and, also doing my acting and the podcast and the YouTube and all the different formats you see, speaking on stages all over the world, traveling a lot with my family. I simply could not do it without consistently coming back to a sacred structure. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm always perfect at it because I am so effing not. But I am going to tell you that I know that when my life works, when things finally shift from like chaos to alignment, when I'm in the flow, when I am the best version of myself, my sacred structure is a big part of it. And if you've worked with me in Practical Magic, if you've read my first book, Eat with Intention, or even it's probably in Manifesting Through Meditations as well, I talk a lot about a foundation for expansion. And I really believe that our foundation for expansion, if we want to create a skyscraper life, if we want to create those big, juicy lives, be these women that have it all, that are thriving in it all, right? Quote unquote, then we need that foundation to support us. You can't build a skyscraper, on a wobbly foundation. So we can't build this big, juicy life that we're dreaming of on an unsteady, unsupportive foundation. And so for me, that is what I'm calling sacred structure. And it's something that, I have really taken to doing at different junctures in my life to realign the sacred structure that is holding me with what I'm currently desiring, the season of life, what I'm aiming at. And so in this, first year of motherhood, this fresh season, postpartum, it's been more critical than ever to really sit in this season with so many new demands on my time. And while I have all these new obligations and demands on my time, I'm also wanting to really honor my soul's desire to pursue more of my creative ambitions, to give that space for my acting, for my writing, while still continuing to coach selective clients and show up here on the podcast and do all the things, right? And so I needed to check in with my sacred structure, because what was working while I was pregnant was not working postpartum. And one of the things that I love to do, whether it's for me or for my clients, is before we even go into, what are the obligations of this season? What are the needs of the seasons? And then what are the desires of this seasons, which will be kind of part two, how we actually create a sacred structure that is supporting you manifesting that desire that you want to manifest. The first part of that is actually looking at your divine design and saying, what do you need to really flourish, to really thrive? And I like to look at our astrology, our human design for that, and then of course checking in with our intuition and our body's wisdom, because I think our astrology and our human design can give us a lot of great information, but we always want to run it through our own intuitive channel and say, does that resonate with me? Does that resonate with me right now in this moment? Because oftentimes when we are looking at our astrology and our human design, we are looking at a very broad, generalized kind of outline, right, of what generally really works for us, which is really helpful. It's really helpful because oftentimes we don't even realize it. And then when that's reflected to us, like, well, you have Virgo in your sixth house. And so you really do thrive when you have a structure, when you have a checklist. And you're like, wow, yeah, I actually do. I love checking things off a checklist, right? I do thrive when I know, okay, this is the itinerary of the day and I'm going to show up and do boom, 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 boom. And I follow my little list. I love that. And sometimes we need that reflection to really honor that. And so in today's podcast, I'm going to go through the different things you can look at in your astrology and what they might reveal when you're putting together your sacred schedule, and this structure that's really going to be able to hold you. And then we'll see how much time we have after that, because there's kind of a few things I want you to look at in astrology. And then we'll see if we can touch on some human design, time dependent. And then if you guys really love this episode and want me to do a part two where we dive into like the second half of what I would do if you're working with me as a client and what I do for myself for the season, where we look at those obligations, my obligations is like your time commitments, right? The things you absolutely have to do every day or during the week. And then we also look at, okay, well, what do I want to be doing? What are my desires and my goals in this season as well? And we program it all into your schedule, so it's there to hold you and support you as you flow through your day and feel like you're making progress and feel super aligned with your soul and your energy and your unique rhythms. I will say when I do this, because of my, which we'll start off with the sixth house. So your sixth house is like the first place that I would look for your daily rituals. This is the house of your day-to-day, daily routines and health. And so my sixth house is in Virgo. And so for me, it is important, like I said, to have that structure. Specifically, I love like having check boxes and to-do lists and getting things done. I also think it's really important to have my wellness, my nutrition, and my movement as part of that daily structure, because Virgo also really cares about health. And so you'll notice that even when I do sacred structure for clients, I like to work in food plans. I like to be like, because to me, you're going to eat every day. And if you thinking about what am I going to eat every day is going to kill a ton of time in the middle of your day and energy and brain power, that's not supporting what you want to build in your life. If you want to have, obviously my first book, if you guys haven't gotten yet, it's called Eat with Intention, we're going to do a re-release. I got updated it all recently. And it'll be coming out in January 2026 called The Mindful Table, which I'm super excited about. But I believe in optimizing your nutrition as well for your productivity. And maybe that's like a totally different podcast. But I look at, okay, let's schedule in your meals. Let's put meal ideas so you have easy, accessible meal ideas. So you're not breaking up the flow or momentum. You're not exhausting yourself by trying to reinvent the wheel for lunch or dinner every day. And where are we going to get our movement in? And again, we connect to your body. You'll see, I'm going to go through my chart with you a little bit so you have some examples, but you'll see how a certain thing in my chart is going to inform my movement. You can also look at this in your chart and see how that's going to inform your movement. And of course, we just energetically tune in, right? So when I was postpartum and I was really, really early postpartum, my movement was going to be different. I'm not going to the gym every day. I'm going to go on a walk every day, maybe with the baby, right? Maybe I'm going to do some like a 15-minute YouTube video. So we customize all of this to what makes sense to your current lifestyle, life stage, priorities. But we're going to look at the astrology first. So that's where my sixth house is. Now, depending on what's in your sixth house, you might have a different daily rhythm, daily rituals. And so that's where I would always look first with a client. And then we want to look at your moon. So this is a little interesting. You might not think of your moon as a place you would care about if you know about astrology. You would care about when it comes to your daily schedule. But your moon is actually your emotional center. So that's going to tell you, like, what are your emotional needs? What are your emotional rhythms? What do you need to feel good about the day, to feel satisfied with the day, which is important to us, right? We want to get your vibe high. We want to get you feeling momentum, and we want to make sure that not only is your structure and your schedule that we're creating effective, but I want it to be fulfilling for you and for me, right? So I'm a Capricorn moon, and that also kind of tracks a bit with my Virgo sixth house in a way of my Capricorn moon feels emotionally stable when I feel productive, when I have tasks and I accomplish said tasks. I am definitely some person, and if you're listening to this and you've been one of my clients in the past, you know this. When we talk about like to-dos and things like that, I'm a huge advocate for a smaller to-do list, but feeling like you can accomplish it every day. Because especially for me, I will say, as a Capricorn moon, if I am writing a to-do list of 15 things every day and getting 13 of them done, I am setting myself up personally for failure because I will not feel accomplished at the end of the day. So, what does knowing my moon have to do with how I set up my schedule? Well, first of all, it's imperative for me to be really clear about the 1 to 3 things. And I think this is applicable to everyone, but it's especially applicable to me with my Capricorn moon. It's imperative for me to know what are the 1 to 3 most important things that I'm going to do every day. So for instance, today, the 1, maybe 2 if we do it like a 1 and 2 parter, right? The 2 most important things for me today is 1, record the podcast, 2, edit the podcast, and then 3, upload the podcast, right? So they're all kind of bundled together, but they are 3 separate tasks, right? I'm recording it right now. I am not editing or uploading it. So they're very different tasks. And if that's the most important thing of the day, 1, it's important for my Capricorn moon to be really clear about what that is so that I feel accomplished at the end of the day when I have finished it. 2, it's also important for me to, even if the most important thing of the day that day is maybe organizing my closet, maybe it's not even a work-related tasks, right? But when I get really clear in the morning or, when I'm setting up my schedule or whatnot of what is the most important of all the tasks I'm going to do. Because there might be a day that goes where like I am recording a podcast and I am, uploading it, but it's not my most important task of the day, right? Like if I had an audition today, that would probably supersede it. That's like the most important task of the day. I need to get that audition done. That is due to someone, they're expecting it, right? Whereas with this is my most important task of the day because I don't have anything outstanding that I owe to anyone else. But this would be the thing that's going to make me move the needle, feel like I was productive, and have that progress. So again, we want to honor our moon because we want to honor what's going to make us feel good. And there's a lot of flexibility within that. Like I said, productivity can look very different on the day. Productivity could look like meal prepping. Productivity could look like cleaning. Productivity can look like an audition or a client session or a podcast. It has a wide range, but the energy of the moon gives us the guidance of like what is important in our day for us to feel fulfilled. So moving on, the next we're going to look at our first house. Our first house, our rising sign, and where our Mars is how we want to like take on the day, right? When I think about Mars, it's like charging into battle. How are we charging into battle? What is the energy of that? So I have Mars on my first house in like a double whammy energy. What does that mean? This means that I really like to like when I'm going, I want to go. And it's actually funny because this is one of the things about me that has made, for a while, I was really pushing against this with my spiritual practice. And it was only full transparency. It was only really motherhood that finally kind of clicked this into higher alignment for me because I would meditate in the morning, and oftentimes if I didn't meditate when I was like still kind of like half groggy immediately after I woke up, like meditated, but sometimes even before I got out of bed, right? I would just stay in the bed, do my meditation for 20 minutes. For me, I either like need to do it that way or I need to come back to it later in the day because once I get going with my Mars and Aries and my Aries rising, I'm like, go, 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 right? And it's very hard for me to then like slow down and recalibrate. But that is my energy in the earlier part of the day. That is not my energy in the latter part of the day. So for me, like a post-lunch meditation or a pre-lunch meditation, whichever, or an early afternoon meditation is actually really great. Or again, I'm doing it right in the morning before we even get going. So for me, it's like if I'm getting in my meditation, it's either when I'm half asleep before my son wakes up, or because of my Aries rising, I'm going to, if I'm dropping off my son, getting him taken care of so that I can start my work day, that first thing is also really good for me to work out in the morning because I start the day with a lot of energy. So getting in a strong workout kind of gets me firing from all cylinders, keeps my energy moving in the right direction, right? So if you had, let's just like play around with this. If you had a Pisces rising and maybe Neptune, you're a Pisces rising or your Mars in Pisces, then maybe doing breath work or a visualization or pulling some cards or a ritual first thing in the morning is really like when you're going to like tune in and connect. And that's kind of how your vibe might be starting the day. You might be someone that, come like 4 p.m., that's like, I'm going to go hit the gym, get that workout in. That's when you're like in your energy or your creative stride, whatever it might be. So again, it's really interesting to know that this was something that I knew about myself before I knew how to figure this all out astrologically. And it is something that I think is really helpful also in just like understanding yourself. We're not all, this is why I talk about, and divinely design your life and with all of my work, right? Is we are all divinely designed. We are also so uniquely and differently divinely designed. And so we're not all one size fits all. There's so many of these books out there, right, that are like, you should be in the 5 a.m. morning club, or this is your top 5 things to start your day, and you should habit stack, and you should do all of this. And I'm like, that BS. Sorry for the little ping. I have to put my thing on do not disturb. um, that's BS. We are all built differently. We all have different rhythms and different flows, and this all is just an example of that. Okay, so now we want to look where Saturn is in your chart. So Saturn is your fair teacher, it's discipline, it's your growth. And I think where it is in your chart gives you a hint at what is the energy that's going to help you really sustain forward movement with your schedule, right? So a lot of times we blame ourselves for like, I just can't keep the schedule. I just can't do the habits all the time, right? We make it all about us. And we then make ourselves feel so bad that something's just like wrong with us. There's just something wrong with us that we can't keep that schedule that we want. Well, now that you've learned all of this, okay, well, if your schedule is not honoring your moon sign, what's going to bring you emotional fulfillment, it's going to be really hard to want to keep doing that schedule because it's not fundamentally satisfying you, right? If your schedule is going against your natural house of daily rhythms, it's also not going to feel really good. Also, if your schedule is going against your sixth house, it's also going to impact your health, right? If you're not honoring that because your sixth house rules both your daily schedule and your health, you're literally not going to feel good. I don't want to like project any negativity, but that is something. When you hear about people getting sick, one of the first questions I would ask would be like, okay, well, what's your day-to-day schedule been like recently? Because oftentimes it's where there's something going on there that's not in flow, that's also causing our health and our physical body to be out of whack, right? Anyway, I digress because I'm talking about where your Saturn is, because this is another thing. Your Saturn is going to show you kind of what that thing that's going to help you keep yourself consistent and going. And so, for instance, my Saturn is in Sagittarius in my ninth house. And so, Saturn in Sagittarius is like the philosopher, the truth teller, right? Which probably makes a lot of sense for you guys who follow me and know kind of what I'm talking about all the time. But so for me, I need my schedule to be connected to with my larger purpose. I need my schedule to reflect where I'm aiming my arrow at any given point of, the timeline. I need my schedule to connect to what my soul's truth is at that moment. That might seem like really heavy, and that's, again, it's not the case for everyone. But because of my Saturn being in Sag in my ninth, that's really important. Me having a rigid schedule for the sake of productivity alone is not gonna continue to thrive. Me having a rigid schedule because I feel on purpose, because I feel that it's in service of a greater mission. Now I'm lit up by being like, I'm on purpose. There's a greater mission. And maybe that greater mission is, sharing information with the world, demystifying certain topics. Maybe that greater mission is serving my clients. Maybe that greater mission, like early postpartum, that greater mission was healing my body and, stepping into this new era of motherhood. That was still where I was aiming my arrow. That was my purpose. So that was therefore driving, when I was waking up, when I was meditating while I was breastfeeding, when I was going to the gym once I got approved to go to the gym every day, when I was going on walks with him, when I was, whatever it was, all those things that I put in my schedule or in alignment with my greater purpose in that moment. Now, fast forward, right? I still obviously want to be healthy and take care of my son, but my greater purpose on the day to day has shifted a little bit more now that I'm back into the work world and I want to talk about things, right? Right now, talking about sacred structure and how much this has helped me and sharing this with other people is a big part of that higher purpose. So it makes it easier for me to show up to do the things I need to do to share about this, right? Okay, so those are our biggest things that I really want to consider when we're talking about astrology and how it affects our schedule. The last thing I would say would be looking at your north node. So your north node is always, when you look at your south node and your north node, I like to describe it as like where you've been and where you're going energetically. So for me, I'll look at that. I have a Libra south node and an Aries north node. And so my Libra south nodes means in other lifetimes, I have probably been more about balance, more about keeping harmony, and prioritizing other people in relationships for the sake of peace. And if we're getting even like a little bit negative, probably someone that self-sacrificed a bit too much to kind of people please and let other people, you know, just to not ruffle any feathers with that Libra energy. Libra energy could also mean I'm prioritizing my partner more, right? So I know that that's where I've been. I'm really good at that. And that's true. I'm really good at that. And where I'm going is my Aries North Node. So my Aries North Node means that when push comes to shove, I know my assignment in this lifetime is to be a little bit more selfish, to put myself first, and to pioneer ways perhaps that haven't been done before, which ultimately again will upset that Libra balance. And so that Aries North Node is really, when I look at my schedule, I would take into consideration, where am I letting things kind of leak in that actually aren't my priorities, but are other people's priorities, right? Where am I maybe not communicating a boundary? And I'll just say I know exactly where this shows up in my schedule. This shows up in my schedule and has probably since I started my career, is that, being a little bit muddy around my availability during the week when it comes to friends and family members and even my husband. So during my Virgo sixth house loves, even though like we'll get into my human design in a bit and how that affects all of this, but even though I'm not necessarily like a typical 9 to 5 person, I love having a structured workday with really clear outline tasks and scheduled and all that jazz. Now, my Libra South node might have me, when a friend is like going through a hard time and wants to, go for a beach walk mid-week, I'll often say yes to that, because I want to be available for them and self-sacrifice some of my own plans that I might have had for that day. So the Aries North Node and looking at your South Node, North Node relationship, I think is helpful in knowing when to say yes and when to say no. And what you might be more susceptible to and where your kind of growth learning edge is going to be. So for instance, my Libra South Node, if I have something, this literally happened like 2 days ago. So I'm just very much learning this along with you. We're all growing together. My husband had said that he was going to drop Hudson with his babysitter because I had to record a few auditions in the morning. But of course, as I'm getting him ready and I'm feeding him and stuff, I noticed that my husband is like not even dressed. Like he's going to be late dropping him off. And I'm like very punctual and conscious and aware of time. So it really stresses me out. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it because instead of like getting mad at you for it or pushing you along or being anxious that he's going to be late or whatnot, I'm just going to do it myself. It's fine. And I self-sacrificed. I lost probably like, 40 minutes that I could have been at home doing my auditions. Yes, I was still able to do everything I needed to get done, and it ended up being fine. But that's just an example of, when we're consciously in this work. I kind of saw it in hindsight afterwards. And I was like, okay, Cass, like next time we really have to stand that firm boundary and say, no, I actually really need you to do this today because I'm going to put myself a priority here. We agreed on this and I need that. And it's the same thing. Like if a friend calls you and asks you for coffee and you have like your certain schedule, you'll see when we get into like actually blocking out the calendar and making schedule that you will see that there are some optimal times in your schedule. It's not like you can never go to lunch with a friend or get coffee or whatnot. I need a lot of flexibility in my schedule once we look at my human design. But we'll have certain times where that will really work for us. And so we look at our North Node just to see like what is the growth edge? What do we want to be conscious of as we're, living in this day-to-day life? And what are the ways that we might be sabotaging ourselves with habitual behaviors? Okay. All right. I feel like there's so much to go. I'm going to give you guys like a tidbit of the human design, and then I'll wrap this podcast. And I would just love to hear from you as to if this resonated with you, if you would like to, go into part 2 with me. In the next couple weeks, I can record another episode where we then take this kind of all this information that we've got in and put it into a very literal schedule and structure. And then with that schedule and structure, we prioritize what is, what are the obligations, what are the goals. And it's kind of like this fun, like Tetris puzzle piecing together that I do derive such joy to do for other people as well. So we take all of that we've learned from our astrology, and then we're going to look at our energy type in human design. I'm a manifester. So if you're a generator and you have a battery, as long as you are doing what lights you up, you're a manifesting generator, you have a battery. If you are a manifester, projector, reflector, our energy is a bit different. And so what that looks like is often just honoring the time that we're going to be most productive in the day. And also for me as a manifester, because my energy is not only less, it's kind of in fits and starts. So I can have like hyper creative days where I can move faster and longer than, run laps around other people. And then I can have other days where I just like totally just need to hermit out and like rest and recharge. And again, we can make a schedule that makes sense for both. So what this looks like for my energy type is having certain blocks in the day that can go either way. So if I'm in a creative urge, then that block can be used to execute that creative urge. And if I'm not, then maybe that block is a great time for administrative tasks. That block is a great time for maybe putting on some like healing frequency and cleaning my office, or downloading and uploading videos that maybe I have to do. It's things that maybe are still helpful and productive, but are not using my like creative power source energy. And because I want that feeling of rest and restoration while I'm doing it, I do often listen to mantras or healing frequencies. I light some incense, I light candles. I make it a very restorative space, so that I really do honor that it's a different energy than when I'm like, go, go, go. I'm going to record this podcast. I'm going to write up this, email. I'm going to, boom, boom, boom. And I can shift it based on where my creative energy is during the day. So if you're a generator, you probably don't need to do that for your schedule, right? But for me, I do. The other thing that is really interesting about my human design, and again, what I let it inflect, is that my authority is my spleen. So I am like very immediately intuitive. So something comes through and it's like, I have to do that. And so again, a lot of the structure that I create, I feel flexible within that structure. And you may have heard me say this before, but it's almost like you got to have the rules, you got to know the rules to break the rules. And so for me, having the schedule, having it all planned out is going to help me know better how I can break the rules if I get a splenic hit. And I'm like, I know I said I was supposed to record actually today, talk about this like a real live example, this podcast, because I had a different podcast, an interview that's recorded that actually I'm really excited to share too. It's amazing about how to detoxify your home. And so that's what I was supposed to edit and upload and, post this week, but it's going to get posted next week now because I just got this splenic hit. Like, no, you have to just start talking about this sacred structure concept and what you're doing, and like, let's do this. Like, people are going to be interested in this. And that was just the intuitive hit I got. So I swapped around it in my schedule and I was like, okay, Cass, we're going to record this. We're going to edit this. We're going to upload this. And then we're going to bump the other one until next week. So even though I have that flexibility, it still serves me to have the Virgo sixth house structure. It still serves me to have that. It's still going to fulfill my Capricorn moon, right? Because it was doing something with a podcast today, getting a podcast up today, right? And I fulfilled that. And so that's kind of the tip of the iceberg with human design. But I think those are the two biggest things. We can also look into, when it comes to human design, your digestion and your environment, and how that all impacts everything. I mean, there's so many things you can look into in human design too. So like I said, that might be another podcast if we need like another part. But that's kind of like the basic overview of the main things that I like to look at. Because if you're a manifester and you're trying to force yourself into like a generator schedule and you get that hit, or you're a splenic authority and you get that instantaneous hit, and instead of just being like, oh, I'm just going to record this podcast today, I was like, you know what, I was supposed to upload this podcast today, so I'm going to push this one that I wanted to record until next week. Then what happens is I lose the momentum, because that's kind of how my authority works, right? If I don't answer it immediately, it's gone. And so because of that, I know for me, the way to do it is to simply swap it out, shift the schedule, honor my urge, honor the intuition, move in that aligned flow, and see what it happens. Now, someone else that has a different authority in human design, let's say you have an emotional authority. Then if you had an emotional authority, then it might actually behoove you to say, no, I'm going to edit and upload the podcast that I said I was going to. And I'm going to schedule the thing I thought of for next week. And then that'll give me some time to just sit with it when I'm not in a heightened emotional state and make sure I still want to record that podcast, right? So depending on your energy flow, depending on your authority and how your intuition is going to speak to you, that's going to kind of shift how you would interact with that schedule. Again, also because I'm a manifester, I am going to also have optional blocks later in the day where if I'm in a creative urge, I can use to continue onwards with whatever I'm, inspired to create and do, right? Or I can also use to do something more restful and restorative if I'm in one of my rest and restore days, right? So it's going to just kind of impact how I'm interacting with that schedule and kind of the optionality of some of the blocks that we would create when I look at the human design in combination with the astrology. Okay. I said I wasn't going to go into it, and I already went into, I think, more than I intended to. But I'm so curious just to hear your thoughts on this. If this is intriguing to you. Like I said, I do have sacred structure sessions where I literally do this for clients. So if you're intrigued and you're like, oh my God, I would love to know this about me, um, I'll put the link below so you can check that out. You're welcome to email or DM us with any questions. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please let me know in the comments if you want to hear part two, if you want to hear more, if you have some questions. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And if you're listening to this wherever podcasts might be playing, then please also feel free to reach out. DM me on Instagram, comment on any of my posts, or you can head to the YouTube version of the episode as well to leave a comment, because I would love to hear, especially if you guys would love a part two and more on this. Let me know. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for being a listener of You with Intention.